It's the summer of 1847. A wagon train snakes its way westward across the dusty expanse of Nebraska. A pioneer family halts near a sluggish, muddy stream. The oxen drink eagerly, but the humans hesitate. Everyone is parched, their lips cracked, throats dry, tongues swollen. The children beg for a sip, but the parents know better. One careless gulp of that cloudy water could mean agony, stomach cramps, dysentery, or even death. So what did they do? How did pioneers make water safe when the stakes were this high? The answer? They relied on clever, practical methods of purification, techniques so effective that survivalists, soldiers, and campers still use them today. And in this video, we're diving into 5 of the best. Life on the frontier was a constant battle with the elements. Food could be scarce, shelter hard to come by, but clean drinking water? That was the single most pressing daily need. On the American frontier, rivers and streams looked inviting, but appearances deceived. Water sources were often tainted by animal waste, stagnant pools, or, on the Oregon Trail, disease spreading from the very wagon trains that relied on them. Cholera epidemics in the mid-1800s killed thousands of immigrants, many because of contaminated water. Settlers knew this. They might not have understood microbes the way we do today. Germ theory wouldn't become common knowledge until the late 19th century, but they saw the link between bad water and sickness. And so, through hard-earned wisdom, they developed strategies to make it safer. In this video, we'll explore 5 of those pioneer methods. We'll look at what they did, why it worked, and how those same techniques still hold value for anyone camping, hiking, or facing a survival situation today. Method 1. Boiling. Night settles over a pioneer camp. The fire crackles, sparks popping into the dark. A blackened iron kettle sits over the flames, water inside hissing and then rolling into a furious boil. Steam curls upward, carrying a metallic tang. The pioneers wait, listening to the bubbling like a promise, the promise of safety. Boiling was the gold standard for pioneers. If they had the fuel and the cookware, they boiled their drinking water. Families traveling the Oregon Trail carried Dutch ovens, tin kettles, and iron pots, tools that served just as well for soup as for sanitation. Even military scouts and mountain men relied on boiling. The journals of fur traders and frontier soldiers frequently mention boiling up water, especially when camped by marshy or stagnant sources. Boiling kills pathogens. Most harmful bacteria, protozoa, and viruses can't survive above 160 degrees Fahrenheit or 70 degrees Celsius, and a rolling boil reaches 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius at sea level. A full minute at that temperature is enough to neutralize most threats. The pioneers didn't need microbiology to prove it. They saw the results. Modern survival manuals still recommend boiling as the most reliable purification method. No chemicals, no moving parts, just heat and patience. The taste might be a little flat or metallic, but it's safe. If you're ever caught in the wilderness today, with a campfire and a pot, you're carrying on the same practice as pioneers 200 years ago.
Method 2. Filtering through cloth or sand. A wagon train halts beside a shallow river, swollen with silt. The water looks more like chocolate milk than something you'd want to drink. One settler ties a square of linen across the mouth of a bucket and scoops. Slowly, the water trickles through, leaving twigs, grit, and bugs behind. Others improvise, pouring muddy water through a wool sock or through layers of sand and gravel in a wooden barrel. This method was common wherever large groups camped together. Military scouts in the U.S. Army of the 1850s describe filtering through cloth before boiling. Wagon trains often used this step simply to make the water palatable, to get rid of floating debris before any further treatment. In some cases, they built makeshift sand filters by layering gravel, sand, and charcoal in a barrel, pouring water through until it ran clearer. Filtration removes sediment, insects, algae, and some larger parasites. It doesn't kill bacteria or viruses on its own, but it reduces the load of contaminants. In practical terms, this meant water that was easier to boil, less foul-tasting, and less likely to clog up cooking vessels with mud. Backpackers today often use bandanas or coffee filters as a pre-filter before running water through a modern purifier. The principle hasn't changed. Strain out the big stuff first, then purify the rest. And in a pinch, if all you have is cloth and patience, even a crude filter makes muddy water far more drinkable.
Method 3. Charcoal filtration. A pioneer camp after supper. The fire is burned down to glowing embers, leaving chunks of blackened wood, charcoal. A settler scoops some out, crushes it between his calloused hands until it crumbles into fine dust. He sprinkles the charcoal into a small cloth bag, then pours cloudy creek water through. It drips out the bottom, stained faintly gray at first, then gradually clearer. The water carries a faint earthy scent, but it tastes cleaner, fresher than before. Charcoal's ability to absorb odors and impurities was known long before the pioneer era. Ancient Egyptians and sailors in the 1700s used it to preserve water in barrels. On the frontier, pioneers made use of what they had, campfire charcoal. Historical journals and oral traditions suggest that fur traders and mountain men sometimes used crushed charcoal as a crude filter, layering it with sand or cloth, or dropping chunks directly into barrels. While historians caution that documentation is sparse, the practice aligns with what we know about both indigenous knowledge and European tradition. Charcoal is porous, full of tiny holes. Those holes trap chemicals, odors, and even some microorganisms. Today we call it activated charcoal, and it's still used in modern water filters, from household pitchers to survival straws. While pioneer charcoal wasn't activated in the industrial sense, even regular campfire charcoal had some absorbent power. Modern survivalists still use improvised charcoal filters. Crush burned hardwood, layer it with sand and gravel, and you can make a serviceable filter in a plastic bottle or a hollow log. It won't kill all pathogens, but it improves taste and clarity dramatically. The pioneers may not have known the exact science, but they trusted their senses. Water filtered through charcoal simply smelled and tasted better. Method 4. Settling and decanting. Imagine a homestead on the edge of the prairie. A child hauls a bucket of muddy creek water, sloshing with silt and grass. The mother pours it into a wooden barrel and leaves it to rest overnight. By morning, the water has separated, the top clear, the bottom thick with sediment. Carefully, she ladles the top portion into another pot, mindful not to stir up the sludge. Settling was a method of necessity, especially for homesteaders drawing from shallow ponds or riverbanks. Diaries from frontier women often describe setting water aside in buckets, barrels, or clay jugs before cooking or drinking. Even traveling wagon trains did this, using large barrels mounted on wagons to let the grit fall before the next day's march. Settling works because of gravity. Heavy particles, sand, mud, plant matter, sink to the bottom. Lighter, clearer water rises to the top. While this doesn't remove invisible pathogens, it drastically reduces turbidity. Less cloudy water meant easier boiling, fewer unpleasant textures, and sometimes fewer parasites attached to larger debris. Today, backpackers and survivalists still use settling as a first step. Collect water, let it rest, then decant. Clear water not only looks more appealing, but also reduces the wear on modern filters. And in emergencies, if boiling or disinfecting isn't immediately possible, settled water is at least more palatable and less likely to carry grit that wears down the body. Method 5. Natural additives and disinfectants. A camp of fur traders deep in the Rockies. Around the fire, a trader pulls a flask of whiskey and pours a splash into a water barrel. Another drops a tarnished silver coin into his canteen. Further east, on a farmstead, a homesteader mixes vinegar into a bucket of well water. None of these steps make the water taste better, but all were believed to ward off sickness. This method was more experimental and varied widely. Mountain men carried whiskey and often used it to purify suspect water, though it was as much for courage as for sanitation. Some pioneers added vinegar, believing its sour strength discouraged growth. The use of silver coins in water barrels has an even older lineage. Greeks and Persians knew that silver slowed spoilage, and American settlers carried that folk wisdom west. Historians note that while not every pioneer did this, the practice pops up in travelers' journals and family traditions. There's truth here. Silver has antimicrobial properties. Ions released from silver inhibit bacteria. Vinegar, with its acetic acid, does reduce microbial growth. Alcohol, in strong enough concentrations, can disinfect. Of course, a splash of whiskey in a barrel of water wasn't enough for true sterilization, but it may have slowed spoilage on long wagon journeys. Today, silver is still used in some modern water storage systems. Vinegar and alcohol aren't practical purifiers by themselves, but their historical use shows the ingenuity of pioneers experimenting with what they had. These additives remind us that pioneers were willing to try anything to stay alive, and sometimes their intuition lined up with science.